GPs and other primary care services. So, Tom, what's being done to improve access to GPs? Because getting a GP appointment just seems to be such a challenge for so many people.
So you'll be aware, or our listeners will be aware of the internet access to GPs. That was a service very much designed around non-urgent need. One of the things which has become apparent is that people are using it for urgent need.
Okay.
And it's an unintended consequence of something which was meant to improve access. But what it means is that some of the time that people would have been, our GP colleagues would have been spending dealing with urgent problems, they now have to look for in the internet access. So what I would ask our listeners to do is use that internet service wisely. Use it if it's a non-urgent thing that you don't need to know about now. A day or two's wait would be fine. And there's lots of things that we worry about. It might be a bit of a rash or something. So there are lots of things that can go on to that very safely. But for the other more urgent things, then perhaps some of those more traditional ways of working with primary care is important.
So is the digital access to GPs not working in the way you would have hoped?
I think it is working for those non-urgent things very well. But as humans, we recognise that some of those waiting times on the phone first thing are not tight. None of us like waiting, whether it be for to get in touch with the utility company or our doctor. And I think we have to really listen to patients, to our neighbours in Somerset about how can we respond better when they're trying to get in touch with us? Because I think there's still lots of learning and work to be done in improving that access. It's not perfect, we know that. And so that some of those initiatives, which were well-intentioned, maybe have had unforeseen consequences, but we need to go back to the ways that work best for people. And I think that's the other thing we have to recognise, that what might work best for me may not work quite so well for someone else. So part of what we have to learn to do, very much listening to the people who need the support and care, is ways that work for them, and make sure that variety of ways into primary care works.
I'm interested in people listening whether access to GPs has improved. I only say that because personally, in our family, we feel it has at our GP. There's been a change, and now it is more straightforward, more accessible. I don't know what the real root of that change is, but let's call a spade and be honest. It has improved. But is that the same for you where you live with your GP? 0800 678 1566. Tom, Somerset's population is growing. We talked about this earlier about winter pressures. How do we know GPs will cope with that demand? Are there plans in place to increase capacity?
Very much so. That's part. We talked about what's the purpose of an integrated care board. That's one of the purposes of an integrated care board, to make sure there is sufficient GP activity commissioned for that community. And so that planning of what's going to happen to the Somerset population, what are the needs of the Somerset population, is one of those things that sits in the ICB's portfolio.
Do you have
things
priorities? Do you prioritise need?
We all have need of care, but we do have priorities. There are some groups in society who will benefit more from better access. So we have to make sure that those primary care resources, and remember, primary care is not just GPs, it's pharmacists. GP surgeries are now much more complex places. They have paramedics, they have specialist nurses. There are we talk about our GP, but actually that service is so much broader than it was 20, 30 years ago. And it's making sure that equality of access, whether you're living in some of the more affluent bits of Somerset or some of the less affluent, is, if anything, better in the less affluent areas, because they are the groups whose needs are greater.
We've touched on this a little bit earlier about use of pharmacies. There are 90 community pharmacies across Somerset. Community pharmacies, should we be using them more?
I think we should, but we'll need to learn. We talked about how we educate ourselves, all the members of the Somerset community, to use resources well and effectively. And these community pharmacies are places where we can get advice about conditions which worry us, but which are usually self-limiting. So that could be a cold, it could be a bit, you're just not a bit fluey and you just need some paracetamol and lots of fluid. It could be a waterworks infection. It could be an ache or a pain, but not an acute pain, but it's just general. So there are things that our pharmacists can give us very useful advice and reassurance about, and we should be using that resource.
Do you think as society we've become a bit lazy? Like, we want an answer and we want it now, and we want to, it's like we don't want to do anything for ourselves. There has been a societal change. I've seen a bit of that since COVID, I think, as well. The way we approach the services that our NHS offers. A sense of expectation.
The biggest resource the NHS is not using at the moment is the people in the community. We have we have wonderful people in our community. There's lots of very wise and sensible people, and they have so much to offer the NHS. And it may be a relatively simple thing. One of the things we talk a lot about is our mental health. One of the things that I find fascinating is the interaction between old and young, because both have something to give each other. There are, in the Netherlands, there are a mixture of care home facility or older age people's residences mixed with student flats.
Yeah.
And I love the way they describe how the life experience of the older people supports the younger people in their traumas of every day, but that enthusiasm and wonder of the younger people lights up the older people. We have so much to give each other, which is not a medical problem. It's about how we interact with each other as humans.
I go to my GP quite regularly because of an ongoing thing I'm living with, and I sit in the waiting room and I see a sign on the wall every week that says 87 GP appointments missed this week, 48 nurse appointments missed this week. Now, that's not your fault, Dr. Tom MacConnell. I know it's not NHS Somerset's fault. How do we get society to understand that by making an appointment and missing it, they are wasting precious NHS money, taxpayers' money? How do we get them to understand? It's impossible, isn't it? But I think it is a waste. It's not just my doctors.
No, Emma, you made a point which I would have made.
Yeah.
That what you've described is both the success, the biggest strength of the NHS, and possibly its biggest weakness as well.
Yeah.
The strength of the NHS is that care is free at the point of delivery. That we cannot underestimate the value of that for everyone in our community. We don't worry if we've got a really serious illness, because the truth is the NHS will pick it up for us. It doesn't matter whether we've got very complex heart disease, an unpleasant cancer, ongoing airways disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The NHS will support us. It will help us. It will hopefully make our lives, which are difficult because of those illnesses better. But we don't understand how much that costs.
I've got an idea, Dr. Tom. We provide everyone with a pro forma invoice at the end of every appointment about how much it would have cost them if they had to pay. And then they would soon open their eyes.
I would love to be able to do that.
I know, it would cost money to issue the invoices. I get it. Right, okay, 23 minutes to 11 now.
The Hot Seat.
BBC Radio Somerset. All across the BBC today, we're taking a special look at the NHS. You're listening to Emma Britton on BBC Radio Somerset, and with you right through until 2 o'clock this afternoon. As part of today's special day, at around 10 to 12 today, I'll be speaking to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Wes Streeting. But with me now in the hot seat is Dr. Tom MacConnell, Deputy Chief Medical Officer at NHS Somerset. We've got some questions coming in that we're going to fit in before the end of the hour. But if you want to squeeze a question in, get in touch now, 0800 678 1566. Tom, I'd like to turn to dentistry. Somerset described as a dental desert because of the challenges getting NHS dentist appointments. Would you agree with that description?
People definitely have difficulty accessing NHS dentistry in Somerset. It is a real issue for far too many people.
Dental desert, do you like that phrase?
No.
No, I didn't think you did. Okay, let's have an example. We've asked people for questions. Here's Nikki in Bridgewater.
My dentist has taken on patients. They're saying, yes, we have vacancies for more patients. When you ring them, it's all for private. And it's still very difficult to get dentists in the country, let alone Bridgewater.
Tom, what's being done to improve access for NHS patients?
So what's been done, there are two important initiatives. The first one is that through NHS 111, if you fulfil criteria, NHS Somerset can arrange for you to have an urgent emergency dental appointment for an acute dental issue. That service is there now.
That exists. So if you're writhing around in pain, reaching for the pliers, trying to take your own teeth out, that's the kind of thing we're on about.
You go through 111 and they will organise an urgent emergency dental appointment for you. And we know we have commissioned enough capacity for the demand. The capacity is there now. You might have to travel a wee bit to get that appointment, but you will get that appointment. For the more routine care,
like Nikki by the sounds
like Nikki up in Bridgewater, that we have, within the last year, we have opened a new facility in Wellington for 20,000 people. There's a new facility in Chart for 13,000, I think it is, and there's another one planned for Crewcairn. There's a very active process of trying to develop interest in dentists in coming to Somerset. Certainly that's a rolling programme. There has been a phenomenal amount of work done by colleagues to get where we've got to. But I hear what Nikki's saying, that Bridgewater is still an issue.
You mentioned Chard, so we know 3 new dental practices opening in the county, one of which is Chard. My understanding is some 8,000 people expressed an interest in an appointment there via an online portal. Registration's been paused until April at the earliest. One woman from the town who missed out said she was angry because she'd heard that some people living more than 25 miles away in Wells had been able to register while she, who lives in Chard, couldn't. The practice says it wants to open access to more people once it's seen its initial group of patients. But Tom, would you not say, is it time to introduce catchment areas for NHS dentists, a bit like we do for GPs, to target the phrase you don't like, dental deserts, catchment areas?
The way the NHS works is that I might have a problem that needs to be treated up in Bristol. But because I live in Somerset, I'm not denied access to that treatment and that's available in Bristol. And I hear what you're saying about local access in Chard, but that's part of how the NHS works, that it is open to everybody.
But we don't do that with our GPs, do we? I couldn't register with a GP in Taunton if I lived in Bridgewater. So why could I register with an NHS dentist in Taunton if I lived in Bridgewater? What's the difference?
I agree there are anomalies in the rules that neither you nor I can come up
Yeah,
with.
and thank you for being honest. Yeah. But it doesn't seem to make sense, and it does seem to be that it's causing these sort of, some people are always straight onto these things and they'll be first in the queue. Meanwhile, someone who lives in the actual town who didn't quite get there fast enough is still without a dentist.
I hear that, and we will continue to work on that.
You're listening to BBC Radio Somerset with me, Emma Britton. Thank you to those of you who have put your questions in. For the hot seat, I'm with Dr. Tom MacConnell, Deputy Chief Medical Officer at NHS Somerset.
A weekend of live sport kicks off tomorrow night as Bath travel to Gloucester in rugby's Prem.
Can he get the ball down? He can. Alfie Barbarella for Bath's second try.
With 3 more commentary matches on Saturday's sport. In football, Bristol City host Sheffield Wednesday in the Championship.
Out as far as Randall hits it.
Oh,
what a goal!
In League 2, Bristol Rovers make the trip to Salford City.
What a goal! Luke Thomas.
And in the National League, Yeovil Town travel to Woking.
Will he get the rebound? He will. Luke McCormick.
The action starts tomorrow from 7.
Follow Bath Rugby, Yeovil Town, Bristol City, Bristol Rovers and Somerset County Cricket.
BBC Radio Somerset.
So, coming up after 11 o'clock this morning, as part of this day, talking about the NHS, we have sent our reporter Luke to the Frome Urgent Treatment Centre to find out about what goes on there. So we'll catch up with Luke later. We'll also have our daily general knowledge quiz, Clash the Professionals. That's still here. That'll be coming up just before 11:30. And then at about 10 to 12 today, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Wes Streeting, has given me a few moments, quite literally, 8 minutes exactly, of his time.
The hot seat.
BBC Radio Somerset.
So our hot seat continues. Dr. Tom MacConnell, Deputy Chief Medical Officer at NHS Somerset, has been answering questions about the NHS. So listeners have been getting in touch, Tom. So I'm going to read this one out first from Angela in Polton. Angela says, I was referred for a hip replacement consultation at the end of last May. I received a letter saying the expected waiting time would be 14 to 18 weeks. Before Christmas, having heard nothing, I rang to chase it up. I was told that a consultant had left, another was off sick on a short-term basis, and the department was already short-staffed. When I asked again about waiting times, I was told appointments could be scheduled from Christmas to February. Eventually I was seen, but not by a consultant. I was seen by an advanced practitioner who told me I now have to wait another 8 weeks for an MRI scan. Meanwhile, I'm in constant pain in my hip. I find the whole process extremely frustrating. I've now been waiting 32 weeks, far longer than the original 14 to 18 I was told to expect. What makes it worse, and this is an important point that Angela has made, Tom, is the lack of communication. We aren't kept in the loop, and it feels like patients are left to chase information themselves while dealing with ongoing pain. What would you say to Angela, Tom?
The system isn't working for her as we would want it to work. For Angela, with her pain, it's a now problem, and we're not responding in a now fashion, and that's not where we want to be. So what I think we have to do is as a whole community, people with the symptoms, primary care, secondary care, look to how can we make that journey shorter. People like advanced care practitioners are one of the ways that we can do that. These are people who have a very specialist knowledge in musculoskeletal problems. They're part of the multidisciplinary team, which has consultant support. It will have nursing support. So there are there are different ways of working which we need to explore. And one of the really interesting things that we've learnt from some of our perioperative work, where people who are on waiting lists for operations have got a little bit further than Angela has, is that if we do very active physiotherapy with them, if we do other things like support them with weight management,
pain management by the sounds of it.
And pain management, that some people get to the place where actually they find, thank you for the offer of an operation, but I don't think I need it anymore. So there are other ways which these problems can be thought about and addressed. And if we're better at using these other ways, it means that the wait times for the people who need an operation, where that's the proper solution for them, can be shorter. So, and that's not a quick fix.
No, and it doesn't answer Angela's situation. I was just curious. Would Angela have been seen by an advanced practitioner because then the NHS could say she'd been seen when it comes to targets? I'm being a bit cynical there. Is that fair?
The truth is always somewhere in between, isn't it? At the end of the day, we're looking after people. And what I want for the people who are important to me is for them to get the care they need as fast as they can. I think as the NHS evolves, we have to, as users of the service, we have to recognise that care will change as systems change. And what I've described to you is a multidisciplinary team that has all the expertise to make sure that Angela gets the right treatment, but it's maybe not how we've traditionally imagined it.
That's it, isn't it? I'm trying to get my head around this. So a bit like encouraging society to think carefully before they go to their GP or A&E by using your community pharmacist. Am I right in what you're saying is some traditional forms of okay, I need a hip replacement, isn't just as straightforward as go to your GP, get referred, see the consultant, have your hip replaced. That now there are other options other interventions, because we look after people in different ways.
Very much so. And I think the other bit that we have to really look at, we've talked about hip pain, and that makes people's lives very difficult now.
Horrible.
It's not something I would want to have. We often occasional ache, and it's not nice.
Yeah.
But to have a constant ache must be horrible. But we have to get much better as a community in protecting our long-term well-being. So we need to be, from a young age, we need to be more active. We need to be more thoughtful about the foods we eat, how we eat them, when we eat them. So
self-responsibility, rather than just always relying on the NHS to mop us up.
Very much so. But the NHS can't abrogate itself of response. It's got lots of knowledge about what makes our lives happier and better. It needs to be able to share that knowledge in a non-medical way, just in an everyday life way that just will make the lot of people in 20 years, if they make those changes now, their lives in 10, 20, 30 years will be better because they've made those changes now.
Some of the comments we've got coming in are people sharing experiences. Mark sent an email and said, I've struggled to get GP and hospital appointments, was referred to Musgrove for dermatology in August and heard nothing since, despite ringing and being told they're behind. I went to the maxillofacial department on Monday for them to look at my wisdom tooth. They rang on Tuesday and I'm having it removed today at 2 o'clock. Ouch. Oh, sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, Mark, you just made me go all wincy. Good luck with that. But Mark says, that's great, very quick service. But it's clear not all departments have the correct staff levels or budget to reduce these wait times. We called an ambulance last year and it took 9 hours to get to someone with sepsis. I went past A&E on Monday on my way to the appointment and the room was full and people stood everywhere. My dad had a massive heart attack in September and we've been waiting for a consultation with a consultant since November and they said it was urgent. Lots in there, but as a cardiologist, Dr. Tom MacConnell, I just wondered if someone had had a heart attack massive in September and they've been waiting for a consultation since November that was urgent. It's now mid-January. Is that typical, would you say?
It's very complicated, is how I would put it, in that when someone has a heart attack, there are immediate risk assessments made of them, and things are put into place to protect them. And one of the biggest, most important things is the cardiac rehabilitation program. There is all the medication that someone's put on, and the people who have most benefit from those early interventions will be identified, and that people, because they're part of the rehab program has a fast track into people like myself. So there is a safety net there, but that doesn't really answer the question of Mark.
Would that be typical?
No, there will be waiting times which are longer than everyone would like. So for me to say there's no waiting issue is just not the case. Again, it comes back to our ageing population and how do we balance the acute risks of someone who's had an immediate problem, and then against the problem of a population which is getting older, and by definition hearts are one of the things that go wrong. So how do you get that balance right?
As people at your level, at consultant level, cardiologists, oncologists, surgeons, do waiting lists worry you? Do they keep you awake at night, or is it just part of the job?
They do worry me. I don't do private practice anymore, but one of the things I used to tease my chief executive colleague was, if I'm doing a good job in my NHS role, my private practice will get smaller. And that's something which I would like to think we can still work to, because that's important, because that's what the majority of people need. They need that timely access to the appropriate care, and that's that restlessness that always wants to make it better has to remain. I think that's one of the real drivers of the NHS, and it's still there in spades amongst all my colleagues. Yeah.
You're listening to Dr. Tom MacConnell, Deputy Chief Medical Officer at NHS Somerset, and me, Emma Britton, on BBC Radio Somerset. We've got just under 5 minutes left, so I wanted to get as many questions in as I could. Jen in Martock says the situation with doctors is not improving here. The form you have to fill out takes ages and doesn't have any way of saying none of the above. If you don't tick a box, you can't move on, so you tick the nearest, but then the person looking at it hasn't got a real picture of your needs. It's crazy, says Jen. We need to be able to make appointments in an easier way. No wonder people miss appointments if they're booked weeks in advance. Sorry, but the NHS is not working here. Is that form for booking a GP appointment standard, Tom, or does each practice have their own?
It's not standard to my knowledge. Each practice will have their own way of trying to triage, sort what needs immediate attention, what needs urgent attention, what needs...
That form's not working, is it?
I agree, it's not working.
No.
And this is one of the ways where we talk about a thing called co-design or co-production, where we build the care around the needs of the community. One of the real challenges in doing co-production is getting people in the community to support that work, to really understand what does good look like.
So should Jen feed that back to her surgery?
Definitely, because we all get feedback, and if we're really being open and honest, we will learn from every piece of feedback, whether it be really positive. And we must remember the vast majority about feedback about general practice in Somerset is very positive. The vast majority is positive for most of our surgeries. In the same way, I'm one of 14 cardiologists. the interaction that individual patients will have with any one of us, myself included, may not be as they would want, because that's human nature. But the vast majority of feedback is positive. But feedback, whether it be positive or negative, is real. And actually, often we learn a bit more from the negative feedback if we're really being open to that.
Jen, I don't know if it's any help. My doctor's surgery has like a patient participation. Is it partition patient involvement? I can't remember. It's PPI or PPF or PFI. I don't know. Anyway, so you could go through them. But if not, I've done this in the past. I've just contacted the practice and said, look, I'm really sorry, but this isn't working. Is there anything that can be done? And if they don't respond, then maybe look at contacting the integrated care board, because then they can take it on that behalf. I'm really mindful of the time. Brian in Burnham, on the issue of GP surgeries, what's being done about more and more practices being taken over by large companies? Many local doctors' surgeries are being bought up by private companies, are they? Who then run them more like businesses than community health services. It feels very similar to what's happened with vets, where big corporate chains have bought up independent practices. Is it a real thing, Dr. Tom MacConnell?
Not as you've just described it. We certainly have groups of practices now. There is Symphony in Somerset, but that, to my mind, is an NHS function. It's a larger group of practices, and there are reasons that bigger groups work better. We've talked about specialist services needing critical mass. The same is true of primary care services. There is a very clear process which all these amalgamations go through, and there's real challenge when we're looking at this to make sure that the needs of those communities are met in a consistent way, and it doesn't actually increase the burden on patients to get the care they need. That there's a very robust process that looks through these business cases. When
the standard of care shouldn't be
shouldn't be compromised. It should be just as good, and that's the argument for putting them together. So we have to make sure that those standards of care are not compromised by these amalgamations.
We've not had time for a question about services for endometriosis in Somerset being non-existent, another person waiting for a hip operation, internet access for doctors again, someone suggesting, this is Claire in Wales, £10 charge for missed appointments. I wanted to finish on this. Elizabeth says, Dear Emma, whilst you're speaking to the doctor about our NHS, would you ask him to thank all in A&E at Musgrove, where I recently had to visit for a bad fall? They were absolutely fantastic, everyone from reception to the consultants. It's good to give praise instead of so much criticism, says Elizabeth. So we thought we'd end on that one.
One of the best bits of my job is thanking people for a good job done. Yeah. So thank you for that opportunity.
We appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us. You've been listening to The Hot Seat on BBC Radio Somerset with me, Emma Britton, and Dr. Tom MacConnell, Deputy Chief Medical Officer at NHS Somerset.